Death. Most fears ultimately come from the fear of death. Everyone has or will face death in their life, and no one can escape death. It's inevitable, it's unstoppable, it's a force of nature. There's no begging or bargaining with death. We can fight it and put it off, but ultimately it will win. So what would death look like if it was to manifest as one singular entity? For today's villain ranking, I'll be covering animated villains that best embody death. I'll be covering the Lich from Adventure Time, Death from Puss in Boots 2, and finally, the Beast from Over the Garden Wall. As always, I'll be using the same criteria to rank the villains. In case you haven't seen one of my other videos, here's a recap. First we have character design, then we have personality, motives and beliefs, then we have abilities and powers, presence, actions, effects on the protagonist, and their conclusion. So without further ado, let's get straight into this. Starting with the Lich from Adventure Time. Design. The Lich has one of the creepiest designs in cartoon history, at least I think he does. Adventure Time is generally a really bright and colourful show, but not a hint of that joy can be seen in the Lich's design. He's so dark and twisted that he looks like he comes from a completely different show. The Lich is basically a skeleton with decaying flesh hanging from his bones. The tearing and decaying flesh is one of the creepiest and most distinct features of the Lich. It's made most prominent around the lips, or should I say the lack of lips. If the torn lips weren't terrifying enough, his eyes are wells of darkness, only broken by the small green pupils. They are large voids that reveal there are no human emotions beneath. It's said that the eyes are the windows to the soul, while the Lich's eyes show nothing but darkness. His terrifying head is topped off with horns, giving him a very distinct silhouette. Like many of the villains I've talked about, the Lich has multiple forms. The Lich's second form is not as visually terrifying as the first, but what it lacks in visual terror, it makes up for in psychological terror. The Lich murders the legendary hero Billy, Finn and Jake's hero and role model. So to see the face of their former friend staring back at them half mangled is horrifying. Most of Billy's body remains intact, but his face shows what lives beneath the skin. One half of his face is Billy, and the other is the skeletal face of the Lich, with his dark eyes and shredded flesh around the mouth. The one horn really finishes off the face really well. The two different faces create an uncanny look. The smile is particularly disturbing. Billy's old face looks so dead. His one human eye seems blank and lifeless. Billy has a tall and long body. This lanky and towering form, now paired with the Lich's face of death, now makes it look creepy and imposing. The next form I want to talk about is a direct continuation of the Lich's previous form. This form is the Billy Lich aged up. In the Adventure Time spin-off show Fiona and Cake, we see the Lich has pushed Billy's mortal form long past its expiration date. Billy's old skin looks wrinkled and mummified, and the hands and feet have worn away until there's nothing but bone. There are rips and tears all throughout the skin. Taking a closer look at the face shows that time has not been kind to it either. The skin looks rotten and is barely hanging on. The skeletal mouth is more exposed. And finally, the most grotesque part is the eye. Faded and deteriorated, it hangs out of the eye socket. Billy's old face has no hint of life in it. Death has fully consumed his appearance, leaving nothing but the Lich. It's really great to see the designers revisit this look, and still somehow find a way to make it far more horrifying. The Lich's next form is the beast that's been lurking beneath Billy's skin. Now that the skin has been shed, all that remains is this skeletal beast. Despite being a skeleton, he doesn't look fragile and weak. He's tall and imposing. His spine and shoulders are lined with spikes, making him look powerful. This form shows what the Lich truly is. He's the bringer of death. He's no mortal creature. He doesn't need the things we need to stay alive. He's the embodiment of death itself. This simpler design strips him of personality to an extent that's perfect for the Lich. He's not burdened by the problems of daily life. He knows what he is. He is the mission to extinguish all life. So his plain skeleton shows that it's all that matters to him. The only signs that this body was ever Billy's is the small signs of damage to the skeleton. His left leg and arm had cracks in the bones, and the ribcage has a metal plate in it. But besides these, there's nothing left. The skeleton form feels like the Lich at his most pure form. It also feels like his final form, but it is kind of complicated calling it a final form. Despite this being what I would consider the final form, he still has some other forms to cover. This is probably the Lich's strongest form, the Jake Lich. This is the Lich from a parallel universe where Jake becomes the Lich. And honestly, this design isn't great. The face is what you would expect from the Lich, except it's got more of a snout and a canine jaw. But the main feature of this Lich is the body. It's Jake if he shapeshifted into a ripped skeleton. I understand why they did this, but it just looks cursed. It would have been nice if the body looked more zombified, but if they'd showed exposed bones, it would have made the stretch powers seem weird. But still, the Lich's head attached to Jake's buff body is weird, it just doesn't transition well to the body. But for what it lacks in appearance, it makes up for in concept. Jake is one of the two main characters, and probably the most beloved character, so to see him with the face of evil is just disturbing. So yeah, enjoy some free emotional damage.
Emotional, damn it!
But on top of that, over the course of the show, we have seen Jake use his powers in countless creative ways, showing how strong he really is, and now that power is the Lich's. After this form, the Lich's hand is cut off, and that hand would return to haunt Finn. I don't really have too much to say about this one, because it's just a yellow spooky hand. One noteworthy thing about the hand is it can make shadow puppets, and the Shadow Lich is pretty cool. Besides shadow puppets, the hand can also control people. This hand bonds with New Death. This is more of an honorable mention because New Death is definitely a different character, but the Lich is hitchhiking as his hand. Overall, the Lich is one of the scariest cartoon characters I've seen in terms of design. With so many designs and changes, it's amazing that all of them have a different way of being terrifying while all feeling very familiar and very Lich. The first 3 designs in particular are really awesome. I'm honestly so shocked they let this abomination on screen, so I'll be giving the Lich a 5 out of 5 for design. His design truly is the embodiment of evil, the embodiment of our fear of death. Personality and motives. The Lich is very simple and complex at the same time. His personality takes a back seat to his motivation. The Lich is driven by his one goal, to eliminate all life, and he devotes every waking moment to achieving it. This one single goal completely consumes him to the point that he doesn't really care about anything else. The Lich is cold and calculating to the point that he acts like a machine sometimes. After the Lich is trapped in Prismo's realm, he goes into an almost hibernation state.
He's stuck in a standstill, like a machine without a purpose.
He knows he is trapped and can't do anything, so he pauses and waits, listening and watching, for as soon as the opportunity arrives, he will awaken. But while he may act like a machine, in his determined, patient and efficient mind, he does show joy. Whenever the Lich is killing or succeeding in progressing in his plan, he laughs and laughs. He laughs his dark, menacing laugh. Speaking of his voice, the Lich is voiced by Ron Perlman. He is the voice behind the famous Fallout quote,
War never changes.
And is the actor for Hellboy. His voice breathes life into the dark monster. So much of the personality comes from his voice. It's so deep and commanding. When he laughs, you can hear the cruel enjoyment he gets out of others' suffering. His voice shows his lack of fear or care for anything other than his mission. It radiates confidence and certainty. The Lich knows exactly what he is.
Yes, while the mortal world doubts and questions, I know exactly what I am. I am the ceaseless wheel, the last scholar of Golb. I am your doom.
The Lich is a force of nature. He lacks any humanity. He simply is death and destruction. He is the embodiment of pure evil. A monster like that can't be reasoned with, can't be deterred, and he can't be stopped, not really. Just like death, the thing he seeks the most. But what happens when he succeeds? What happens when all life is extinct? When all that remains is him, sitting on a pile of the dead? His one reason for existing is over, and what then? The Lich hasn't left room for anything else, and we see this in Fiona and Cake. We find him sitting atop a pile of bones, dormant. Like when he got stuck in Prismo's realm, he only reawakens after being disturbed by Simon. He threatens them.
In olden days, I would have rewarded your insolence with death 1,000-fold.
But he doesn't seem to have it in him anymore. Being left alone without a purpose for so long has changed him, even made him question his purpose. This is the only time we really see him deviate from his mission. It enrages the Lich, who goes to Golb. Golb's kind of a long story, we'll get into that later, but he sees Golb and screams at him, asking what more he could have done, pleading for purpose. This is the only time we truly see the Lich out of his soulless-driven mindset. It's one of the only times we see him experience something close to humanity. As Simon puts it,
he seems really depressed.
Now we know that the Lich is solely driven by his one purpose, destroying all life. But where does it come from, this drive? And where does a creature so vile come from? This is a rather complicated answer, because in the Adventure Time lore, reincarnation is a thing. But let's start at the beginning, and by the beginning I mean the very beginning, the beginning of time. In fact, not even the beginning of time.
Before there was time, Before there was anything, there was nothing. And before there was nothing, there were monsters.
As shown in the clip, the Lich has knowledge of a period of time before the universe even existed. This could be implying that the Lich existed in this time period. All that lived in this time was monsters, so this period of time was extremely chaotic. This leads us to where the Lich's motivation may come from. The Lich proclaims to be the last scholar of Golb, so the Lich has studied and devoted his entire existence to a mysterious creature called Golb. Golb is a mysterious interdimensional being with powers close to a god. He's, as far as we know, the most powerful creature in the Adventure Time universe. Golb is said to embody chaos, so maybe during this time of monsters and chaos, the Lich found Golb and began his ultimate evil devotion to him. It's extremely unclear and mysterious. The Lich's next appearance is as a catalyst comet. In Adventure Time, a catalyst comet arrives every 1,000 years, and it hits Earth, causing it to change. The Lich seems to reincarnate into one of these catalyst comets, and flies towards Earth. Urgence Evergreen, the first ice elemental, tries to stop the comet, seeing its true intent.
This Balthus is no ordinary comet. Behold! See how it writhes? It aches for our extinction.
So we know the Lich has had his goal of destroying life and worshipping Golb since it was a comet. He crashes into Earth, killing the dinosaurs, but his essence remains waiting to return. Maybe the Lich helped manipulate the vents that would lead to the Mushroom War, but what is known is the Mushroom Bombs either contained or unleashed the Lich's essence, and a new body was born from the ashes of a nuclear war. War never changes. It's unclear if the Lich's motives come from before time, or from the fact he is a creature born from war. All that is certain is whatever caused the Lich to follow Golb made him worship Golb so much that there is nothing else in the Lich other than his ceaseless goal of destroying all life, turning him into the perfect depiction of death. Like death, the Lich is never truly defeated. He is ceaseless, he is inevitable. In the end, he's barely a person, he's a force of nature. And because of this, I'll give the Lich a 4 out of 5 for personality. He's truly terrifying, and is just the embodiment of evil. Sometimes it's refreshing to see a villain who's evil for the sake of being evil. It's also nice seeing his personality being shown to us more and more as the Lich comes to see Finn as a real threat, and a somewhat equal. Powers and abilities. The Lich has a lot of dark abilities at his disposal. His strongest ability is his mind control. When trapped in amber, the Lich is constantly casting spells to control minds. So without magical crystals to protect your mind, you can't even get close to the Lich without him taking control of your mind. This mind control is also used with spoken words, like stop and fall, where the victim falls into darkness, where the Lich can command them. He also has the ability of possession, where he can steal someone's body and make it his own. Speaking of body swapping, the Lich's essence is very powerful. We see it possesses Princess Bubblegum, but it also may be able to cross dimensions. We see Farmworld Lich has the knowledge of the OG Lich, so it can either influence other versions of itself across dimensions, or his spirit can jump worlds. The Lich reeks of death. Life just dies in his wake. When he escapes the tree, at the Candy Kingdom, the branches die at his touch, burning a hole through the tree. As he crosses the ocean, fish die in his presence. The Lich can also breathe a toxic gas that disintegrates the host. The Lich can also turn into a gas form to escape situations. Probably his most iconic ability is his green fireballs that he can shoot. When possessing Princess Bubblegum, he demonstrates pyrokinesis and lights the room on fire. The Lich's original form and his Billy form are giant compared to Finn, so he has natural strength. He can also straight up fly. It's unclear what power this is, but the Lich seems to be able to corrupt stuff, turning his prison crystals into a dark melting goo. The Lich can just cast evil spells in general, being able to turn life force into dark energy. He can also raise the dead at his will. The Lich from Farmworld also has Jake's stretchy powers. The Lich also just seems to be immortal, never aging or dying. He can wait as long as it takes. And on top of that, he's just nearly unkillable in general, having so many ways to revive himself. One of the Lich's greatest abilities is his mind. He has knowledge of many interdimensional things, like building portals. He knows about godlike creatures. He has seen before time itself, and he knows about things like Prismo and his wishes. But his greatest strength is his will. As he puts it, he is a ceaseless wheel. He is a force of nature that will never stop. The Lich probably still has many other powers and spells that we don't even know about, making him even more potentially dangerous. I'll be giving the Lich a 4.5 out of 5 for power, only rivaled by creatures like Bill Cipher and the Collector for power on this tier list. They can manipulate reality at will, making them effectively gods. Presence. The Lich has a handful of appearances, and every time he shows up, he feels like a real event. It always pushes the Adventure Time lore forward. His actions always leave real consequences and affects the overarching story. Examples: the Lich possesses Princess Bubblegum, and she then dies. That's right, you heard me. Dies! But not for long. She is revived again, but she's turned 13.
Princess Bubblegum is now younger. She's 13 years old now.
Oh, dang it! Well, I'm out of here. Goodbye, everyone.
Which kicks off a whole arc between Finn and Bubblegum. Then later, when the Lich makes a wish to destroy all life, it creates two universes, Farm World and a world where the Lich wins. These effects are lasting and impactful throughout the show. This gives him a good sense of presence. But outside of the physical effects on the world, the Lich leaves a lot of psychological scars on Finn. We see that Finn is deeply affected by the Lich and their encounters. He appears in Finn's nightmares. We see Finn keeps a vault of repressed memories in his head of all the trauma he's been through and wants to forget. And of course the Lich is in there. The Lich is such an important part of Finn's life that he is name-dropped outside of episodes he's actually in. This gives him a lingering presence throughout the show. The general effects he has on everything and everyone makes him a constant afterthought. How difficult the Lich is to kill always has us wondering where he's lurking and when he'll show his face. But he's not just an evil presence lurking in the shadows. He appears in every episode of Season 3 and Season 4. He's always there and always watching, but not in the way you would think. In every Adventure Time episode is a hidden snail that waves at the audience. This snail is mostly a fun Easter egg. That is until the Lich's first proper episode. The Lich possesses this snail, using it to free his true form. But after the Lich is defeated, the snail escapes. He then begins plotting the Lich's return, and watches Finn and Jake from the background. The possessed snail appears in every episode of Season 3 and 4. So overall, I feel the Lich is very present throughout the show. He doesn't appear often, but he does appear all across the show's time airing. He even appears in the spin-offs. But even when he's not around, he's so memorable that he always lingers in the back of our minds. And our heroes' minds. So I'll give him a 4 out of 5 for presence. Actions. The Lich starts off extremely strong in his first full appearance. He shows us how dangerous he really is by escaping the amber. It shows that one small oversight is enough for the Lich. He then leaves to go end all life with his well of power. At this point, this has been the biggest threat we've seen in Adventure Time. After being defeated, he possesses Princess Bubblegum, which results in her becoming a gross monster, which results in her temporarily dying. But this isn't the only time the Lich would possess and kill one of Finn's friends. The Lich murders Billy, Finn and Jake's hero and role model, and then uses Billy's body to impersonate him to trick Finn and Jake into helping him. But this pales in comparison compared to what the Lich would do next. The Lich would get to make a wish from Prismo, the Wishmaster. The Lich wishes for the extinction of all life, and he actually succeeds. All life is eradicated. Well, sort of. It causes the creation of 3 realities. There's the main Adventure Time continuity, there's the farm world, and there's the Lich's world of death. So the Lich straight up achieves his goal. In the Farm World dimension, a universe created from Finn's wish that the Lich never existed, even in this world where the Lich doesn't exist, he still finds a way to survive. As previously mentioned, in this world, the Lich mutates Jake into his new host, again taking away someone Finn cares about, his closest friend. It also just shows us how inevitable he is. There's nowhere to run from him, no way to permanently stop him, just like death. The next time we see the Lich, he murders Old Man Prismo, which in turn kills Wishmaster Prismo. This results in the Lich being sent to an interdimensional prison called the Citadel. The Lich kills all of the Ancients, who run the Citadel, and releases all of the prisoners, allowing the multiverse's greatest criminals to escape and run free. The next thing the Lich does feels quite underwhelming compared to his time on the Citadel. The Lich is trapped within Sweet Pea. Yeah, it's a weird and long story. But anyway, the Lich breaks through Sweet Pea's subconscious, and terrorizes 2 scam artists, who were scamming Sweet Pea. While this is very minor, it gives us one of the best Lich speeches, so that's pretty cool. We then jump back to Farm World Lich. We see he's manipulated this world's version of Finn, who is losing his mind due to the Ice Crown. The Lich builds a portal that puts you in every dimension. The Farm World Lich dies, but his hand is cut off and falls into this portal. So part of the Lich exists in every universe, making him basically impossible to fully kill. We see in Fiona and Cake that the Lich exists in many worlds already, but now there are at least 2 Liches in most dimensions. The Lich's next appearance is again not as big as the previous one. The Lich's evil hand tries to corrupt Sweet Pea so he can bring back the OG Lich. This is actually the Lich's final appearance in the main show of Adventure Time, but in the continuation show Distant Lands, the Lich returns and he definitely makes up for his lackluster ending in the main show. The Lich convinces the Son of Life and Death to kill Death, making the Son New Death, and the Lich controls New Death. This essentially makes the Lich the embodiment of death. The Lich's final plan is to stop reincarnation and end all life. But these are just the evil scenes we see him doing on screen. But on top of this, he's committed other atrocities. As previously mentioned, the Lich's essence was in the Catalyst Comet that killed the dinosaurs and nearly wiped out all life on Ooo. And there's the Great Mushroom War. As speculated, the Lich might have been the cause of this apocalyptic event. The event basically kills off most of the humans, making a zombie apocalypse essentially. This is definitely one of the biggest lore points. In Adventure Time, it creates the world of Ooo as we know it in Adventure Time. So the Lich potentially causes 3 near extinction events, which is far more than most villains I've covered. Most of them on average have 1 genocidal event. But on top of these, the Lich does a lot of personal evils to our hero Finn, which I'll cover in the next section. The Lich is always very personally involved in his evil schemes, willing to get his hands dirty, unlike some villains I've ranked, who lurk in the shadows, getting others to do their dirty work. But that doesn't mean he's not willing to influence and corrupt others to do his dirty work either. Out of all the villains I've reviewed, the Lich may have the highest kill count in terms of genocides and on-screen murders, so I'll be giving the Lich a 5 out of 5 for actions. Effects on the protagonist. As we have previously talked about, the Lich basically lives rent-free in Finn's head. There are many examples of how deeply the Lich affects Finn. One of my personal favourites is when Finn faces the King Worm. He's trapped Finn in the dreamscape and is draining his life force. The only way to escape is by exposing your greatest fears, and of course the Lich is there, and it results in one of the funniest Lich scenes.
I'm having coffee with the Lich. You wouldn't understand.
Another example is in the series final. Finn and Fern have to find common ground, and that involves opening Finn's vault. Finn's memory vault is full of his worst fears, so of course the Lich is here. This being the final episode means we have seen most of Finn's adventures, and despite everything he's seen and experienced, the Lich remains one of the greatest fears. But besides fear, how else is Finn affected? The Lich has helped Finn mature and grow as a hero. The Lich's first episode really kickstarts the lore in Adventure Time. Before this, Finn and Jake were going about doing goofy things, and it's not that they don't keep doing this after, but the Lich is a real threat, with real stakes. It forces them to take things more seriously, and to face more serious challenges through the series. The Lich kills a lot of people, Billy being one that really affects Finn. It forces Finn to face his grief. I'll give the Lich a 3.5 out of 5 for effects on the protagonist. It's clear he affects Finn a lot in his encounters, but some of these effects aren't as personal as villains like Emperor Bellos. Finn has also had a lot of other things pushing his character arc forwards. Conclusion: death is inevitable and unbeatable, but is the Lich. How does his story end? Well, that question is not as direct as it might sound. You could count the last appearance in the main Adventure Time show, or you could count his conclusion in Distant Lands, which is his last appearance in the timeline so far, or you could talk about his last on-screen appearance, which was in Fiona and Cake. So we have a lot to work with. I'll start with the Lich's first ending in the main series. Finn is trapped in the Lich's well of power. Finn throws a weak insult at the Lich, saying he's so evil it's boring, and the Lich drops another sick speech.
Yes, while the mortal world doubts and questions, I know exactly what I am. I am the ceaseless wheel, the last scholar of Golb. I am your doom.
The speech is just perfect. It embodies everything the Lich is. His certainty in his purpose. He's beyond the average man's desires. Then Sweet Pea drops in, literally. At first it appears that Sweet Pea has been corrupted, embracing his inner demons. But Sweet Pea's sweetness is not so easily corrupted. He turns on the Lich, slaying him, cementing that the original Lich won't be escaping from Sweet Pea anytime soon. So what are the pros and cons of this ending? The pros are that they really define who the Lich is. As I've said many times, he's beyond humanity, beyond our thoughts and feelings. There's no room for doubt or worry, he knows exactly who he is. The cons are, this feels like a very lackluster ending for the Lich. Yes, it's a good way to conclude Sweet Pea's arc, but the battle's been between Finn and the Lich for the whole show, and Finn doesn't really even contribute in this final fight, missing most of the battle himself. It's also kind of surprising that the Lich isn't even involved in the last episode. He's been the big bad for the whole show, so it feels weird to kill him off in Season 9, not even making a proper appearance in Season 10. While not a bad episode, it's not the best ending for the Lich. Good thing this is rectified in Distant Lands. Distant Lands has one of the all-time best episodes of Adventure Time, taking place in the afterlife after our heroes have passed away. This ending is the perfect send-off for Finn and Jake, so it feels fitting that their last battle would be their oldest enemy. It's perfect, it has high stakes, with the Lich holding reincarnation hostage and preventing new life. It has another amazing monologue, referencing their history. I love how we got to see how the Lich has changed, showing while Finn and Jake grow and evolve, the Lich has stayed stagnant in his ways, causing him to fail over and over again, reducing his form to a mere hand. But in this episode, the Lich has become what he has always seeked, death. This episode is not so much about the actual events of the episode, but the dilemmas he makes. To kill Death, someone must take his place, so Finn and Jake have to choose who will be the sacrifice. Well, yes, like the previous ending, Finn isn't the one to get the final blow, Mr. Fox does. This still doesn't change that this battle forces Finn to face the idea of losing Jake permanently again. This ending is just so rewarding, it's honestly a perfect ending. So it only feels right that the Lich is there. He may not be the focus of this episode, but the moment he has is some of his best. So that leaves us with one last ending. The Lich's last on-screen appearance so far. In Fiona and Cake, our heroes get stuck in the Lich's wish world, a world where all life is extinct. Simon and the Lich escape to face Golb. We see a very different side to the Lich. As Simon puts it,
He seems really depressed.
the Lich has lost all purpose upon completing his mission. He has nothing left, so the Lich takes this out on Golb, the one he's done this all for. The Lich sits muttering to Golb, till finally Golb notices him, and the Lich can no longer hold back his rage.
No, answer me. What more could I have done? What do you want from me now?
But despite his desperate pleas, Golb barely acknowledges him, and finally the Lich is lifted into the air and is punished. Torn apart, broken, and moulded into another cube. Side note, there are a lot of these cubes. Could they have been other versions of the Lich who succeeded in their missions? Maybe he's destroyed many universes. But anyway, back to the ending. I'm sort of split on this ending. On first viewing, I had no issues with this ending. It's interesting to see more to the Lich, and it does feel like a very final ending to him, because the Lich is near unkillable, always finding a way to return. The only real way to beat him is to crush his purpose, to make him doubt his goals, because it's all he is. But this is also why the ending is flawed. It reduces the Lich from a force of nature to a cultist. He wants something from Golb, maybe appreciation. It reduces him to more of a human status, having him doubt what he is, going against the first ending we discussed. That ending showed us that he has absolutely no doubt. And the Lich didn't even complete his mission. We know he knows of other worlds, so it's strange he would just give up after destroying one. It seems very out of character. To be honest, it's very unlikely this is the Lich's last appearance, with the future Adventure Time shows planned. So how will they move forward with him? Will they act like this never happened, pretending he's an unwavering, unstoppable force? Or will they embrace this, making the Lich have a new dark purpose? Maybe he could try and overthrow Golb, becoming the new god of chaos. Who knows? So overall, I'll give the Lich a 3 out of 5 for his endings. If I was only counting the Distant Lands ending, it would probably have been higher. But is this even really the Lich's end? If he truly is like Death, then he'll be back. He's the ceaseless wheel, the last scholar of Golb. He is the end. He could come back any number of ways. He now exists in all worlds, maybe even twice in most. His spirit still lurks in the afterlife. And deep down, he still waits in Sweet Pea. It's only a matter of time, really. It may take a while, but Sweet Pea will eventually pass on. 1,000 years later, we see he is aging, but when he dies, the Lich may be free. All he has to do is wait, like Death waits for us all. Overall, the Lich gets a total score of 29 out of 35. But let's move on to the next villain. This one literally being Death, and I don't mean metaphorically or rhetorically or poetically or theoretically. He's Death, straight up. Puss in Boots 2 has been probably my favourite movie of recent history. It's an absolute masterpiece. And its villains are no exception to this. The movie juggles 3 different villains extremely well, but the one we will be talking about today is Death. Let's start off with design. Death's appearance in Puss in Boots 2 is a large wolf. According to the first thing that pops up on Google when I search Death being represented by a wolf on Google, wolves in German and Norse mythology are symbols of death and destruction. Skoll and Hati are the 2 wolves in Norse mythology who chase the sun and moon. During Ragnarok, they will catch them, ending the world. They embody destruction and chaos, so choosing a wolf to represent death is a good start. The wolf is extremely large and imposing compared to Puss. The bar scene really shows the size difference. The most striking part of the design is his red eyes. They stand out as so threatening against the darker shades. His eyes glow and are normally the first thing you will notice when the wolf enters a scene. Death's expressions are terrifying. They turn a wolf into an angry or mocking threat. You can see he loves every second of the hunt. Death never rushes, he lets the fear take hold, and his face lets us know he's not worried at all, because no matter what, Death catches up to all of us. His cloak also gives him an extra intimidating silhouette. But by far the most unique part of his design is his weapons. This Death doesn't use a classic scythe, no, he has 2 sickles. And man are they badass. Death swings the sickles in such a fun and creative way. Every pose of their battles are awesome, especially the scenes that have Death or Puss reflected in the blades, showing who has the upper hand in each fight. We can't talk about Puss in Boots 2 without talking about its beautiful art style. Every frame of this movie is stunning, it's beautiful. The beautiful water painting inspired style really helps to ramp up the wolf's fear factor, making him look 10 times more intense. Whether it's a blood red background, or shadows darkening to increase his presence, or even the colourful backgrounds to highlight his intimidating silhouette. The art style always enhances Death's movements. Now, I wasn't sure where to add this, but I think this fits in design. Whenever Death enters a scene, he whistles a creepy tune. This melody gives me goosebumps every time. It's just perfect. So overall, I'll be giving Death a 3 out of 5 for design. Personality and motives. Death resents the idea of cats having 9 lives, and Puss has thrown them all away, with his reckless and carefree attitude, not even losing a single life for anything important. Death decides Puss hasn't earned his last life, and decides to cut it short. This version of Death seems to revel in the hunt. It's all about the chase. He never runs because he knows no matter what, Death always wins. He's extremely confident and likes to mock Puss when he can. He seems to show real resentment towards Puss when he explains how little he cared about his lives. I personally enjoyed the cold, determined personality of the Lich, but this confident Death, who plays with his prey, is still a very good interpretation of Death. It just feels very right as well. He's Death, of course he's confident in his actions, he always wins. Of course Death is disgusted at cats having 9 lives, it's a mockery of everything he is. So it seems very appropriate that he would single out Puss. Puss laughs in the face of Death, so of course he's going to anger him. I'll be giving Death a 3 out of 5 for personality. There's nothing bad about him, we just don't get to see too much of him to enjoy this personality. Abilities and powers. It's really unknown what this Death is capable of. Despite knowing he is supernatural, he mostly sticks to fighting and intimidation, something a mortal can do. Death is extremely good at fighting with his sickles. He's unbelievably fast, being easily able to dodge Puss's attacks in the bar, even having time to insult Puss as he does it. He very quickly overpowers Puss, and to put this into perspective, the movie starts with Puss effortlessly defeating a giant, who is so big that Puss is just about the size of his fingernail, so that gives you a good idea of the power scaling. So, one of Death's best skills is his fighting, but what else can he do? Well, intimidation is one. He clearly likes messing with Puss in Boots. He can take on Puss in Boots anytime he likes, but he decides to mess with him instead. His intimidation is so strong that the mere sight of Death sends Puss into a panic attack. Death is probably an expert hunter. He easily can find Puss no matter where he runs. Death appears to have the ability to be seen by whoever he wants to be seen by. When hunting Puss, there are moments where it seems only Puss can see Death. Death is standing in a crowd, but only Puss notices. It's only at the very end of the film where someone else even sees him. Death can also summon fire, as seen in the end fight of the film. He also appears to be very strong, easily smashing crystals when he encounters Puss and his previous lives. It's not ever said, but Death is probably invincible, because he is literally the embodiment of the concept of death. He also seems to be able to project himself through those crystals, and make hallucinations of himself in the forest. Death is just mysterious to us, so it makes sense that we don't know what he's truly capable of. This mystery really adds to how intimidating he is. I'll give Death a 3.5 out of 5 for powers and abilities. It probably should be higher, but we really don't see him do anything super insane in the movie. Comparing him to some of the other villains I've ranked who can destroy worlds just doesn't seem fair to put him in a higher spot, since he mostly just sword fights. Presence. Normally I talk about TV show villains on the rankings, so they have lots more time to be involved in the story. Death has only 3 major scenes, and a handful of smaller appearances, and in these scenes he steals the show. He has such a strong presence throughout the movie. Even before he makes himself known to Puss and the audience, he's still there. When Puss is fighting the giant, the camera pans across a crowd of people, and there, watching, is Death. A foreboding omen for what's about to happen to Puss. After Puss dies to the bell, and finds out he's on his last life, that's still not enough to scare him into retirement, but after his encounter with Death, Puss is left terrified, and runs off to hide in retirement, giving up everything he's ever loved. Every action and choice Puss makes after this is mostly out of the fear of death. His main motivation is to get more lives so he can avoid death. Death appears every time Puss starts to enjoy his adventure and forget his worries, to remind Puss how inevitable he is. When Puss and his gang escape Jack Horner, he throws a bunch of gold to a crowd. Seeing the crowd cheer and the thrill of escaping makes Puss feel like his old self for a moment, but Death appears to remind Puss his time is up. Death also appears in Puss's moments of weakness. After Death makes Puss painfully aware of his mortality, he struggles in battle against Jack Horner, freaking out at all the chaos. And Death once again whistles his tune to remind Puss it's nearly time. Death scares Puss enough to abandon his friends. Death's influence is felt throughout the whole movie. He's probably the villain who gets the least screen time, but is by far the most important. I'll give Death a 4 out of 5 for presence. Actions. Death's first appearance is so important. 1, it establishes him as a massive threat. As I said before, him beating Puss so thoroughly after seeing Puss take down the giant is already a big deal, but on top of that he cuts Puss with his sickle, causing him to bleed. Now, if you were paying attention to the song Fearless Hero in the beginning of the film, one of the lyrics is, "Who's never been touched by a blade? Puss in Boots is never afraid." If we take this literally, then Death cutting him is the first time he's ever been cut by a blade, the first time sword fighting has become a real threat to him. This, on top of his realization of his mortality, breaks him. Death's next major appearance is in the cave. He scares Puss into pursuing the star alone and abandon his friends, but on top of this, it helps Puss self-reflect. Death tells him why he's haunting him. He makes Puss realize he wasted all of his lives, never appreciating any of them. And finally, their final confrontation, the battle on the Wishing Star. This is definitely Death's biggest event. He's finally done toying with Puss and is ready to finish the hunt. Death cuts Puss off from his friends and forces him to make a choice. Run away to more lives with his wish, or face his fears and take back his life that he's grown to appreciate. This fight is the perfect conclusion to Puss's character arc. Besides Death just generally haunting Puss, this is mostly all of his scenes. Now, I know I've been brief about his actions compared to the other villains, but this is one movie compared to TV shows, so obviously there's less to work with. The things he did do really push the story forward, and were absolutely vital to the movie as well. So I'll be giving Death a 3 out of 5 for actions. Effects on the protagonist. It's very obvious that Death has a very strong impact on Puss. In fact, there's no doubt about it. This has been one of the most open examples of a villain impacting a character. As previously mentioned, the opening scene with Death really forces Puss to reflect on his mortality, and again, as previously said, this breaks Puss, making him feel real fear, maybe for the first time. We see Puss completely broken and given up in the cat retirement home. Puss is completely out of it, submitted to his fears of death. It's not often a villain breaks a hero this bad. This breaks Puss on every level, making him willing to give up who he is. The only thing that entices him out of this state is the idea of gaining more lives to escape death. So to sum this up, Death affects Puss with pure fear. So much of this fear is expressed and shown in the amazing animation. Probably the best example of Puss's fear of death is during the Battle of Jack Horner's Men, where Death appears. Puss freezes in fear, his hair stands up, and then he runs. The world becomes dark and blurry, images of Death appear everywhere in the trees and in the rocks, closing in on Puss. Puss falls down under a tree, all sound is drowned out by the sound of his own heart. Puss has a panic attack. This has got to be one of the best depictions of a panic attack, not just in animation, but in cinema in general. I've done a previous video where I've talked about this scene in more detail. Link in the description. Even in the final battle with Death, we can see even after Puss wins the battle, Death lets him go, for now. Puss lets out a sigh, showing that even though he put on a brave face and believed in what he was fighting for, he was still terrified. This is exactly the sort of effect you would expect from the literal embodiment of death. This is easily a 5 out of 5 for effects on the protagonist. I've never seen a character so deeply affected by the presence of a villain. It's all handled so well and treated so maturely. So that just leaves us with the conclusion. Does death have a satisfying conclusion? For this final battle, the animation is firing on all cylinders. This whole battle is just beautiful. Puss finally has a chance to wish for more lives, but the bone-chilling whistle starts. Death is here, and he cuts Puss off from his friends with a wall of fire. Death taunts Puss to fight, and like the beginning of the film, Puss's life flashes before his eyes, only this time he's focused on the ones he cares about, and then a stunning fight breaks out. A highlight for me is when Puss pulls out the small knife Kitty gave him. It shows that his friends are still behind him, even if they aren't literally. It also shows what he's fighting for. Puss defeats Death, but remains humble.
I know I can never defeat you, Lobo, but I will never stop fighting for this life.
Death is enraged. He looks into Puss's face, but he can see Puss has changed.
I came here for an arrogant little legend who thought he was immortal. But I don't see him anymore.
He lets Puss go, giving him a chance to live a meaningful life he appreciates. But he reminds Puss they will meet again. This is honestly a perfect ending, not just for the action, but for the message. No one can escape death, but we can hold it off. We can fight for the things we love and care about. We need to cherish what's important in life and make the most of it, so when we do inevitably face death, we can go peacefully, being content with the life we had, knowing we made the most of it. That's the best way to face death, not to defeat it, but to know our time on Earth is limited, and to cherish and respect it. This ending gets a 5 out of 5. It's the only real way to fight the concept of death. Puss in Boots 2 went above and beyond anyone's expectations, and death was an amazing part of what made this movie so great. Death's grand total score is 26.5 out of 35. So now, let's move on to our last villain for today, the Beast from Over the Garden Wall. Now, I don't think my rating criteria will truly do the Beast justice. He doesn't have much screen time, but the way he fits into the themes of the show really amplify him as a villain. He also isn't necessarily an embodiment of death, but he does toy with souls, and he looks hella spooky, so he still felt fitting to talk about. Design. The Beast is shrouded in darkness, to the point that he might as well be darkness. He might as well be a voice in the dark, the shadow of a figure in the woods. He's our fear of being watched in the dark. The Beast's most striking aspect is his eyes. They shine like two headlights in the dark. If it wasn't for his eyes, you would barely know he was there. This leaves the Beast a dark silhouette, with the only noteworthy feature being his antlers. Despite being such a simple design, he looks straight out of a horror movie, lurking behind trees and staring in the distance. He looks incredibly unnerving. This, paired with his deep, commanding, but sophisticated sounding voice, makes him seem like the ultimate threat. The Beast is always used sparingly, and used in ways that conceal his true appearance. We only get a tiny look at his true self, only for a moment. And it is truly horrifying. Now, quick spoiler warning, please go watch Over the Garden Wall before proceeding. It's worth the watch. Anyway, here goes.
Go now!
If we pause when the flicker of light reveals him, we can see his horrifying form. His body appears to be made out of souls, consumed from the Edelwood. His body is a mess of contorted wooden faces. His arms are riddled with holes, and his mouth is a dark abyss. I love how we only see this for a second, making it all the more terrifying. The Beast's design relies on what you don't know, because the unknown is one of the scariest things. I'll give the Beast a 4 out of 5 for design, personality, motives, and beliefs. The Beast is kind of like a blowfish. The Beast uses its appearance to seem far more dangerous than he really is. He relies on this fear to manipulate people. The Beast is driven by one thing, to keep his lantern lit. And he will do anything to achieve this goal, and this mostly involves manipulation. The Beast uses his intimidating form and mysterious being to instill fear in whoever he wants to control. This fear leads to less rational thinking, which allows his lies to go under the radar. He's also very well spoken, sounding very confident and matter-of-fact, which pushes his lies even further. The Beast is normally calm and can control. This only breaks when the lantern is threatened. The only thing the Beast seems to do outside of this constant manipulation is his singing, but even this could be a fear tactic. I'll be giving the Beast a 2 out of 5 for personality. I know this is pretty low, but compared to other villains I've ranked, we barely see the Beast, so we only see a very limited view of him. Even with other cold, evil characters like the Lich, we see more depth to his darkness, while the Beast is just not around enough to get a high score. Abilities and powers. As I previously said, the Beast relies on fear to get things done, so his main abilities is his intimidation and manipulation, but besides that it's unclear what he can do. He appears to be very weak in reality. In terms of powers, we see he can manipulate darkness, make it close in on his victims. It also constantly enshrouds him. The Beast also seems to have a connection to the Unknown. Now, it may not be him, but the Unknown can claim lost souls, turning them into Edelwood. One other ability the Beast may have is his connection to the Black Turtles. The Black Turtles appear to be able to corrupt creatures like the wolf in episode 1. The Beast and the wolf have the same eyes. But that is really it for the Beast's power. I'm going to give him a 1 out of 5 for powers and abilities, because his powers are really just a facade that once seen through are completely useless. Presence. This is where the Beast truly shines. Throughout the show, we constantly hear about how the woods aren't safe because of the Beast. Episode 1 has Wirt and Greg meet the woodsman, and it's all he can talk about.
These woods are no place for children. Don't you know the Beast is afoot here?
In episode 1, we see a huge monstrous wolf, which our heroes think is the Beast, but is revealed to just be a dog. But this image of the wolf sets up the idea that the Beast is far more dangerous. This monster wolf was already very strong, destroying the mill, but the Beast is supposed to be so much more, making us wonder how evil and powerful the Beast truly is.
He stalks like the night. He sings like the four winds. He is the death of hope. He steals their children.
Episode 4 opens with a man riding frantically through the rain, screaming about the Beast is upon him, again reminding the audience of the Beast's ever-watchful presence. Then we see some townsfolk in a tavern. They also sing about the Beast and how threatening he is. This again sets the mood for the Beast. But they also add more mystery to the Beast, putting suspicion on the woodsman. They explain a lot about the Beast, but it still makes him more mysterious. Everyone in the Unknown knows and fears the Beast, so there's a constant tension building to his appearance. The Beast is mostly seen lurking around the woodsman. His brief but creepy appearances give us a taste of what's to come. It's especially creepy when he says which way did the children go. His presence is felt through the whole show. Every shadow feels like he could be lurking in it. Some of the episodes are very dark and unsettling, so being told someone is out there is a chilling thought. The Beast is constantly present while barely appearing, because the real Beast is the idea of what he could be. I'm going to give the Beast a 5 out of 5 for presence. Actions. Near the ending of the show, the Beast lures Greg away from Wirt. He then tricks Greg into waiting in the snow, so the forest can claim him. The Edelwood grows around Greg, slowly turning him into one of the trees. This is what the Beast does. He's been claiming countless souls for countless years, all in service of keeping his lantern lit. There's no real way of knowing how many people the Beast has claimed. The number is unknown. Probably the cruelest thing we see the Beast do is control the woodsman. The Beast tricks the woodsman into believing he had trapped his daughter's soul in the lantern, and the only way to keep her alive is to feed the lantern. The lantern needs an oil harvested from the Edelwood, so the woodsman spent years cutting and harvesting the wood, not knowing where the wood comes from. But the cruel part is, the lantern doesn't even contain his daughter's soul. It actually contains the Beast's soul. His daughter escaped the Unknown, but the Beast tricked the woodsman, keeping him from his daughter, becoming the Beast's unknowing accomplice. And by the end, he tries to trick the woodsman into harvesting Greg. He also tries and tricks Wirt into becoming the new lantern bearer. The Beast doesn't do too much, but the things he does do is horrific and cruel. I'll give the Beast a 2.5 for his actions. He doesn't do much, but what he does is so cruel and horrifying that he's still up there for me. Effects on the protagonists. The obvious effect the Beast has on Wirt is fear, but what the Beast truly is to Wirt is a final test. The Unknown is a mysterious place, and almost everything isn't what it seems. The vicious wolf was actually a stray dog. The gorilla was a man trapped in a gorilla suit. Greg's frog was able to sing. The girl Wirt wanted to save from her evil stepmom was actually the monster, and the stepmom was trying to help her. So Wirt has learned to not take everything at face value, and to look closer. And the Beast in appearance is the hardest obstacle, but Wirt looking closer and listening realizes what the Beast's true intent is, and can overcome it. The one who's been affected the most by the Beast is the woodsman. The woodsman is a glimpse of what Wirt could have become if he hadn't learned from his previous adventures. He would have been chained to the Unknown, lost in the dark. The woodsman has been trapped so long that now he feels he can't ever stop, until someone else ends up showing him the truth. The fear of losing his daughter completely blinds him to the lies of the beast and completely traps him. I think I'll give the beast a 3 out of 5 for effects on the protagonist. The beast is more of the conclusion of the arc, not necessarily the driver, but it is really interesting to see how it affects the woodsman. Conclusion: the beast sings his song, luring the woodsman out into the forest.
Woodsman, I knew you would come. I have something for you.
The beast finally reveals the truth about the Edelwood to the woodsman. The trees are the lost souls of children, and Greg is his next offering. The woodsman, shocked and disgusted at the truth, lashes out at the beast. The beast pushes the woodsman, taunting him with his daughter. In a rage, the woodsman attacks the beast, and the beast just dodges, laughing. During this fight, the lantern is forgotten, leaving it open for Wirt to find. And upon finding it, he also finds Greg stuck in the Edelwood. While they struggle to free Greg, the woodsman collapses behind them and the beast approaches. The beast claims that Greg is too weak to go home and will be consumed by the forest. The beast sees his moment to strike. He sees Wirt is desperate to save Greg and bets on his panic to trick him. He offers him the same deal he offered the woodsman, to trap Greg's soul in the lantern so Greg can still live.
Take on the task of lantern bearer, or watch your brother perish.
At first, Wirt submits blindly, approaching the beast ready to give in, but then he stops and thinks about it.
Wait, that's dumb.
What?
That's dumb. I'm not just gonna wander around in the woods for the rest of my life.
Wirt goes on how that's a futile quest, and it's strange that the beast cares so much about the lantern, and that maybe his soul is in there. The beast is completely enraged.
Are you ready to see true darkness?
The beast bellows, "Are you ready to see true darkness?" And Wirt, in a sort of badass moment, goes, "Are you?" I love this moment because Wirt's voice cracks the first time, so he says it again, showing he is afraid, but despite that he knows he's onto something and trusts himself. He threatens to blow out the lantern, and the beast shows fear for the first time. Wirt sees the beast for what he truly is, a lie. He huffs, knowing the beast is harmless, and gives the lantern back to the woodsman, saying, "I've got my own problems to take care of, this one's yours." The boys leave, and in a last desperate moment, the beast once again tries to get the woodsman to do his bidding and finish off the boys. But it's too late. The facade has been broken, and the woodsman can see the truth. For a moment, the light hits the beast, showing he's made of all the lost souls the woodsman has fed him. And looking into the lantern itself, the woodsman no longer sees the flame as his daughter, but as the beast with its horns. The beast yells at him, "You will never see your daughter again. Are you ready to go back to that empty house?" And with a tear in his eye, but determined, the woodsman blows out the light, and everything goes dark. I love this ending. It's a perfect final test for Wirt. He's been afraid and submissive throughout the whole show, so to see him learn from his travels is really rewarding. But it's also good to see the woodsman break free of the beast's chains. Overcoming the beast let them both understand each other better, and finally move on from the unknown and return to reality. I also love that the beast is a perfect embodiment of the unknown. It seems daunting and mysterious, but often isn't what it appears to be. The beast isn't that deep as a character, but as an idea he's powerful. As something to learn from, he's great. Even though his total score won't be the highest, I think he's basically a perfect storytelling device. He's the manifestation of the obstacles our heroes have to overcome. And as a depiction of death, he's really interesting. He has a unique way of harvesting souls, and like the fear of death, he can control us and push us to do things we don't want, or miss out on things we want to do, things we might be too afraid to try. And like death, he's mysterious. So that fear of the unknown is perfectly represented by the beast and the unknown in Over the Garden Wall. I'll give the beast a 3 out of 5 for conclusion. This gives the beast a grand total of 20.5 out of 35. Comparing this with the other scores, that puts the beast at the bottom with his 20.5 out of 35 score. Then coming in second is Death from Puss in Boots, with a score of 26.5 out of 35. And of course that leaves the Lich in number 1, with a score of 29 out of 35, but that was probably pretty obvious from how long I talked about the Lich. Now let's add these villains into our ever-growing list of ranked animated villains. So now we have Gideon in 12th place with a 17.5. Then we have the Collector from the Owl House in 11th place with a score of 19. After this is the Devil from Cuphead in 10th place. In 9th place, we have Toffee from Star vs. the Forces of Evil with a score of 20 out of 35. And now it's getting a little interesting. We have our first double up score. The Core and the Beast tie for the same score of 20.5. So I'll just have to choose based on my own personal bias who goes first. And sorry Over the Garden Wall fans, but I can't split up the core and Andreas on the rankings, so I'll put the Beast in 8th place, which then puts the core in 7th place. This of course leaves Andreas just above his Evil Master in 6th place. Above Andreas is the Lord Commander in 5th place with his score of 24 out of 35. Now, squeezing in between the Lord Commander and Belos' old spot is Def coming in 4th place with his 26.5. Now, for our top 3 villains. In 3rd place we have Belos with his score of 27 out of 35. Is Bill's Cypher finally going to be overthrown? The Lich has a total score of 29 out of 35, which was the same score as Bill, but if you're a loyal Bear With Me fan, you may know that the Book of Bill video I did, I gave Bill a few extra points, boosting him up to a 31 out of 35. So the Lich is in 2nd place and Bill still reigns supreme. But I'm glad to have a villain who comes so close to Bill for me. But what do you guys think? This is all just my opinion after all. All these villains are special. That's why it's so enjoyable to break them down and talk about them with you guys. I don't ask this often, but I would greatly appreciate you subscribing. I'm nearly at 10k and it would be just amazing to cross that milestone. But now to important business. What video next? I'll be doing some polls on my channel for upcoming videos. I'm thinking of doing another protagonist video, maybe a Cartoon Network one. I've been watching Steven Universe, so there's a good chance I'll cover the villains from that on one of the next villain rankings. Lots of you guys really wanted me to cover mentor figures from the Owl House, Amphibia, and Gravity Falls, and I've had a few ideas for ranking which cartoon world is the best to live in. So if you want to help decide, go check out the polls, and please leave comments on what villains and characters you would like to see in general. I personally really want to cover the Ice King at some point. Anyway, I've definitely talked for far too long, so thank you so much for bearing with me.